Why I am not a polyglot is simple to answer on the surface of it. It's the actual answer to the question is fairly simple. The ramifications of the answer, that is why I'm not a polyglot, but I still have a channel that is designed to help you learn languages, that is a little more complicated. Still relatively simple, but a little more complicated. So first things first, why I am not a polyglot, that's very simple. I only started getting into languages when I was 30, and I'm only 33 now. So it's been 3 years, just over 3 years that I've been into learning languages. And in that time, I've only had the chance to learn 2 to any decent level of fluency. Now, some people would be like, well, if you only do it for 6 months, then you can learn quite a lot. And obviously you could have learned 6 in that time. I can test that. You could learn enough to sound like you speak those languages. Yes, you can learn enough to do some videos that have been prepared in those languages. That is, you've prepared them and then you sort of you spend a few hours sort of perfecting everything as much as possible. It still shows, by the way, that that's what you've done, but you could do that, and then I could claim, I think I could probably claim that I spoke 12 languages if that had been my goal over the 3 years. But would I really speak them? No. Could I actually have a conversation with someone that was useful, right? I could have a conversation with someone to look like that person was like, oh, you've learned a little bit of my language, right? But let's say a French woman turns up here and doesn't speak a word of English, like other than the French words that are all the same, but she doesn't actually know anything about how to express herself in English. She turns up here and she needs something badly. She needs to get to the hospital or something. And she's trying to express that. And they call me over. Can I actually help in that situation? Yes. Is my French perfect? No. They're different things. But I think a lot of YouTube polyglots, like people who just learn enough to sound like they speak it for a video, they can't help in that situation. They wouldn't be able to understand what she wants while she's sort of screaming hysterically. And they wouldn't be able to communicate an idea about how to, call an ambulance. We would just call the ambulance for it, but you get what I mean. They wouldn't actually be useful in a French-speaking situation, right? And I use French. Swedish is actually my stronger language. Would I be useful if in the bizarre scenario that a Swede who didn't speak any English, which is kind of weird anyway, came here and, yes, I would be useful. I would be able to help out there. So in that way, I speak the 2 languages. I can sound a bit like I speak other languages. Ich bin immer bereit zum Deutsch reden. I think that's right? I could work on that and sound like I could speak German, but I don't. I'm not useful in a German-speaking situation, and just be wary of anyone who sort of claims that you only need to spend 5 or 6 months, especially 3 months, to learn a language to a useful level. I think it's a little bit context dependent, so if you're living in the country and you're studying actively, then yes, maybe. But if you're living abroad, or if you're living like at home, like I am, no. When I say at home, not like with my mum, I'm married. You know what I mean. If you're living in a country where only the one language is spoken, like Australia. People don't learn languages as a rule as adults in Australia. Even actually people who don't speak English often don't learn English as an adult in Australia. So yeah, that's the basic answer. I've made it way longer than it needed to be about why I'm not a polyglot, because I want to learn the language as well. In fact, while we're on that, I actually have, sorry, just bumped the mic there. I actually have a ton of respect for someone like Matt versus Japan. I'm guessing his actual name is Matt, but you know the channel Matt versus Japan. He learned Japanese and I think is still learning. I think he's interested in Chinese now as well, to a massively high level. Like it's insane how good his Japanese is. Not that I speak Japanese enough to tell, but you can hear it that it's very confident. It sounds exactly like a Japanese person as far as I'm concerned. So it's just so high, and it's taken him a really long time, and he makes he has no shame in admitting that. It's a hard language. In fact, the FSI, Foreign Service Institute of the USA, puts it at the highest of their list. It's the hardest language for an English speaker to learn to a very high level, and Matt has learned it to a very high level. So if you asked him why he's not a polyglot, He'd probably say, because I've been focusing on one language. It's actually harder to learn one language, especially if it's like Chinese, Japanese, Arabic, to a very high level, than it is to learn French, Swedish, Danish, German, Spanish, and Italian. Like, you would learn those 6 to a sort of low level more easily than you would learn Chinese to a near native level. So the basic reason that I'm not a polyglot is that I've only had 3 years to do it, and I don't want to speak them to a low level. I want to speak them to as high a level as I can possibly motivate myself to get to. Now for the more complicated question of why I have a channel dedicated to language learning if I would seem to not actually know more about that topic than anyone else. Than anyone else. I always make English errors that I would never make in the real world when filming these videos. Anyway, that kind of, to me, it makes a lot of sense, but it may be hard to explain. It's an easy question to ask. Why should we listen to you? If you only speak 2 languages and not to that higher level, why should we listen to you? That's just it, right? You listen to someone like Luca, and I'm going to use Luca, that's Luca Lampariello, as an example for this video, because I don't think any accusation can be thrown at me that I don't like Luca. I've made a whole video about him and how cool he is, and like, everyone knows that I like Luca, so this is not any kind of shade at Luca. I'm just using him as an example. You look at someone like him, and he has his advice about language learning, and I always think, well, that's great, but that only applies if you have your systems in place. That is, and by your systems, I mean things like your motivation, your routines, your goals for life, your goals for language learning. All those things are really, really important, and they're the things that most people don't think about. They just dive straight into it. Yeah, I want to learn a language. That's what I did with Swedish for the first 2 years at least. And that's why my progress was very fast at first, because I was really motivated. But then it just dropped off because I was like, hang on, this is hard, right? If you have those things in place, then Luca's videos are great. So they're good for me because I've started getting those things into place. But the reason that I have this channel, and the reason that I feel like I'm still able to impart wisdom to you, is precisely because I'm still figuring that stuff out myself. About that bang there, that's the rain. I'm still figuring that stuff out myself, right? So I can actually help you to figure it out because I'm much closer to your level. It's a bit like if you take an example of like Tony Robbins, the motivational speaker guy, right? He's always saying, oh, not that I watch him heaps or anything, but I think I read some of his book. He says stuff like, you know, I started down in the dumps and blah, 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 and fast forward 8 years and I'm flying my own helicopter that I bought with my own money and I'm flying it myself because I wanted a helicopter's license. It's like, dude, he's taken this thing so far and he's gotten so far with it, with achieving his goals and everything else, that to look at him, if you look at him as someone who's like, you know, homeless or, you know, they've just had a marriage breakup or whatever, he's so far through that stage that you can't actually see the journey to get there. It's just, he's so far along the path that you can't even see the path that he's taken anymore. It's like a little dot in the distance, if that. That's a little bit like listening to someone like Luca, because Luca's pursued this for so long. He's so good at it. He's got all his systems in place. He does this as a habit every morning. He gets up and studies his language for an hour, at least, I think. And he's got all this other stuff that helps him keep languages as part of his life. He offers coaching in French and Italian, obviously, is his native language, and English. And I think he offers coaching in basically all the languages that he speaks to a high level so that he can regularly speak those languages. Most of us only dream about even being in a place where that's possible, myself included. We can't just suddenly take advice that is really, really specific about, he did a video on how to get the most out of YouTube videos in your target language, and he talked about like seating position and stuff, and I found it really helpful. But for most people, they would go, yeah, that's a great idea. But the truth is they're not actually going to follow through with that because their systems aren't in place. So this channel is about helping you to get your systems in place, and it's also about sort of going along with that with you. I don't like the phrase showing you my journey, or going on my journey with you. I don't like those kinds of phrases, but that's basically what it is. I'm not trying to be someone who's like, yeah, I'm the best, I've learned French and Swedish, which are two comparatively easy languages, right? I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to say, okay, this is how I learned Swedish. These are the struggles I had with it. These are the things I did wrong. This is what I'm not going to do again. This is where my Swedish is still lacking, because it is still lacking. And the further you get into Swedish, the harder a language it is, because it's just it's like easy at the start, hard at the end. That's just the way around it is. So is French. So these are the kinds of things that I'm trying to explore myself, and I'm trying to show you, where I've gone wrong with them, where I've gone right with them, and other things that I do in my life. I talk about a thing I call holistic language learning on this channel, and I know it sounds like a bit of a gimmick, but it's totally something I believe is a necessity for learning a language. That is, it's the idea of getting your systems in place, right? So if you're going to actively learn a language, and especially if you're not living in the country in question, or even if you are, you need to have these systems in place. You need to be thinking about when you're learning your language. What kind of time of the day do you have to do it in order that it's effective? What time do you therefore have to get up? Do you have to exercise to make your brain healthier? Do you have to do other activities to do with your brain? Maybe just, to do with your brain? You know what I mean. Do you have to do other mental exercises to help you be a mentally healthy person? Even things like your relationships, how you can get rid of sort of time-wasting relationships that are in your life. This is all sort of stuff that I've been thinking about lots recently, and I want to do videos about that. So basically, I kind of forgot where I was at when I got interrupted on the take there, but what this channel is about is someone who isn't a polyglot. The whole point of this is that I'm not at such a high level with this stuff that I just assume it to be the case for other people, because I think when people get really, really good at something and really, really used to it, accustomed to it, then they just sort of do these videos like, oh, you should be doing this, and you should be doing this, and you should be doing this. And it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We are so far from a place where we can have that conversation. What we need to be talking about is how to get your life systems in order. What we need to be talking about is, how to motivate yourself, rather than exactly how you should be holding your pen, or exactly, should you be on this channel on YouTube, or on this channel on YouTube, or should you use Duolingo or Memrise. You want to talk about, I want to talk about motivation. How to choose a language that's actually something you're going to stick with, how to stick with a language that you've already chosen that you're getting bored with, all the kind of stuff that is exactly what I've struggled with in even just the last 2 years, because in the first year I was just so keen for Swedish that none of this stuff mattered. I just went Swedish, Swedish, Swedish. But in the last 2 years I've kind of gone, and then sort of, okay, how do I get out of this? How do I continue making this a part of my life? And that's the conversation I want to have. And I won't be doing it any faster than you can. In fact, depending on what you've got going on, you can probably do it faster than I can. So I'll never become like one of those people who's just so far ahead of you that this channel won't be helpful. And if I do, I want to make sure that I keep making helpful videos to sort of not beginner language learners, but people who are only now having those struggles about motivation and all the rest of it. So I hope that has answered the question of why I'm not a polyglot. The simple answer is 3 years is not long enough to become a polyglot, and why I'm still feeling like I should offer advice on language learning, even though I'm not yet a very, very successful language learner myself. And that is the reason, is that I'm going through this as well. So I hope you've got something out of it. If you're new here, please subscribe, give the video a like, leave a comment, let me know what you think of all this, all that good stuff, and I'll see you in the next one. Hej då!